Professor Ian. This is my hopefully brief lecture on dramatic monologue. Dramatic monologue is one of my favorite kinds of poetry. I love reading dramatic monologues. So let's just jump right into it. A dramatic monologue we can define as a lyric poem, so something written from that I perspective, has an I in it, that takes the form of an utterance by a single person addressing a silent listener. So it's like a speech from one character to another silent listener. The speaker can be a historical, legendary, mythical, or entirely fictional personage. So sometimes, a lot of times it's just some made up character that's speaking in a dramatic monologue, but sometimes authors will write from the perspective of a famous person, dead or alive or whatnot. So a dramatic monologue consists entirely of the words of a single speaker, a persona, who reveals in their speech their own nature and the dramatic situation in which they find themselves. That should be find, not finds. Again, it's a speech from one character, right? The whole poem is entirely that speech. It's not a back and forth. It's just one speech from one character to another. So there's a difference between a soliloquy and a monologue. You might have come across this before. A soliloquy is a speech in which a character, usually alone, reveals their thoughts, emotions, or motivations without being heard by other characters. It's a popular convention in plays, especially the Elizabethan era. Shakespeare used a lot of soliloquies and other playwrights of the era. Of course, probably the most famous that I could reference would be Hamlet's "To Be or Not to Be" speech, right? That's a soliloquy. He's talking to Yorick's skull, kind of. He's just reflecting on this. He's not speaking to anybody, but he's revealing his thoughts to the audience. And now a monologue is different. A monologue is a speech given by one character to another, or by one character to the audience. A soliloquy, of course, is meant for the audience, but the fiction of a soliloquy is that it's the character thinking aloud, right? So there's a little bit of a difference there. So dramatic monologue has a speaker. So you have a persona, a specific persona speaking, an embodied, character. Dramatic monologue has an implied audience. That speaker is speaking to somebody. It doesn't have to be, it's not always clear when you're reading a dramatic monologue who the speaker is speaking to, but there is an implied audience. And the reader takes the part of the silent listener, so we get to kind of fill in the audience role. And the speaker uses a case-making argumentative tone. They're making an argument, trying to convince the implied audience about something. So we complete the dramatic scene from within by means of inference and imagination, right? We had to fill in the blanks. A dramatic monologue isn't like a ballad, which we've talked about, in which the speaker sets a stage, right? A ballad is very much like a storyteller kind of genre of poetry, whereas a dramatic monologue, the speaker often doesn't tell us, exactly what's happening. We have to fill it in based on what they say or what they don't say sometimes. Which brings me to my next point. Dramatic monologues often rely heavily on irony, right? Because we have a speaker speaking, giving their point of view, and oftentimes maybe they're untrustworthy or they're blind to certain things, and there's a certain amount of irony that comes in a lot of the time. So quickly, we'll go through a little bit about irony. Irony is a literary and rhetorical technique that deals with the gap between expectations and reality. So the word irony is hard. I put in parentheses impossible to define in full. There are scholars who write whole books about what irony means and how it operates. So it's a slippery term with a lot of different meanings, but we're going to talk about three main kinds of irony. I'm just going to go through them quickly. Verbal, situation, and probably most important for us right now, dramatic irony. So verbal irony are just statements that reflect the opposite of what it actually means. Understatement, overstatement is the usual kind of thing. For example, I really love getting up at 6 a.m. to catch the bus to work, right? I'm being ironic. Of course, that's not true. There's a gap between the truth and what I'm saying, right? And, you might think of sarcasm. Sarcasm falls under the heading of verbal irony, right? It's a kind of verbal irony meant to insult somebody. That's how you can define sarcasm. Right, so for example, wow, Jim, those are really cool pants. I didn't know bell bottoms were back in, You're very fashion forward, right? I'm sure I know you're familiar with sarcasm, so I won't belabor the point. But that falls under the heading of verbal irony. Situational irony is when the exact opposite of what is expected or planned for happens, right? But there's a difference between just bad luck and situational irony, right? I have an example here. If you plan a picnic and it rains that day, that's bad luck. That's not really situational irony. That's maybe a tiny bit, but it's we can think of it as a spectrum, right? However, you check the weather report every day, and the weather person stated there's no way it could rain that day, and then you planned all around that one day based on trying to beat the rain, and then it did end up raining. That would be more an example of situational irony, right? You plan for something, you work towards something, and then the exact opposite happens, right? So that's situational irony. And then important for us, dramatic irony. So dramatic irony, I don't know why this picture is covering that up, but refers to situations when the audience or reader has more details about the characters and the plot than the characters in the work do, right? So the reason I have these pictures here, Frasier and Friends, if you watch those shows, they operate a lot on dramatic irony. There's always a misunderstanding between characters, right? So Phoebe will walk in on Joey with a woman who's not his girlfriend. She thinks it's that he's cheating on his girlfriend, right? But we, the audience, we know that this is Joey's cousin or something like that. We know that there's a bit of misunderstanding, but it leads to comic tension between the characters because they are not fully aware of the situation. Joey doesn't know that Phoebe saw this. Phoebe doesn't know, this is Joey and his cousin. She thinks it's something else. And so there's, tension and misunderstandings and funny dialogue, supposedly. I don't really like Friends. But, it's beside the point. Beside the point. A lot of sitcoms operate or use dramatic irony to fuel the humor. Frasier did this a lot. If you watch Frasier, it was very much just a French farce every episode, using this dramatic irony, these misunderstandings to create humor. In more serious work, if you've seen Shakespeare's Othello, it's a really great one of my favorite plays, Shakespeare plays. Othello is this ruler, and he's being told by his advisor that his wife Desdemona has been unfaithful to him. His advisor Iago, and Iago's been telling him this throughout the whole play. Hey, Desdemona's cheating on you. She's unfaithful. Eventually, Othello comes to believe Iago, and then and turns against Desdemona. And there's this really powerful scene at the end where he strangles her to death on stage. It's a really powerful scene, and it's so much more powerful because we, the audience, we know that Desdemona has been faithful to Othello, and we know that Othello is wrong to blame Desdemona for being unfaithful because she's been, the perfect wife for him the whole time, been faithful, and we know that he's making this tragic mistake. And then, after he murders her, he realizes this too, and it's this great moment of catharsis for the audience. It's a very powerful moment. If you ever get a chance to see Othello, I would strongly suggest it. But that dramatic irony in Othello is not for humorous purposes, not used for humor. There's some jokes in Othello, but it's not mainly to drive humor, as in like a Friends style sitcom. So when you're reading a dramatic irony or a dramatic monologue, you need to think about the use of irony because we're only getting one perspective, right? Or we're getting a character. So a lot of the times authors will use irony to create some kind of effect, either show you a problem in society or for humor, right? Or various other effects. But we need to ask ourselves, what does the speaker of a monologue reveal about him or herself? How much is intentional? How much is not? Right? Are we supposed to think the speaker is a jerk and they don't know it? You might think about that as you read through My Last Duchess. And then situational irony. Does the speaker of the monologue, what do they hope to accomplish with their speech? Is that effect achieved? Do they achieve the opposite? What's the situation there? So here's an example of a dramatic monologue. This is I Sit and Sew by Alice Moore Dunbar Nelson. And she was the wife of Paul Laurence Dunbar. For a time, they split up, but she was married to the more famous poet Paul Laurence Dunbar. She published a couple really good collections of poetry too, but her husband is far more anthologized and remembered, I think, at large. He wrote "We Wear the Masks" and or Wear the Mask, and a whole bunch of other poems. Anyway, so let me read her poem. I sit and sew, a useless task it seems. My hands grow tired, my head weighed down with dreams. The Penelope of war, the martial tread of men, grim-faced, stern-eyed, gazing beyond the ken of lesser souls whose eyes have not seen death, nor learned to hold their lives but as a breath. But I must sit and sew. I sit and sew, my heart aches with desire, that pageant terrible, that fiercely pouring fire on wasted fields and writhing grotesque things, once men, my soul in pity flings, appealing cries, yearning only to go there in that holocaust of hell, those fields of woe. But I must sit and sew. That the little useless seam, the idle patch, why dream I here beneath my homely thatch? When there they lie in sodden mud and rain, pitifully calling me, the quick ones and the slain. You need me, Christ, it is no roseate dream that beckons me, this pretty futile seam, it stifles me. God, must I sit and sew? So, powerful little poem, 3 stanzas. I've just put it this way on so you can see it all in one PowerPoint slide. Usually we go vertically, of course. 3 stanzas of 7 lines with a strong AA, BB, CC, D, or you could put R because there's a repeated refrain at the end of each of the stanzas, or modified refrain. So you got this formal structure. It's not free verse or anything like that. And a dramatic monologue can be in any rhyme structure or scheme. You could write it using any form. The dramatic monologue idea is just about the things I was talking about, the speaker and the implied audience and all that stuff. So we have this I, right? And we can guess from the context this is a woman at this point in history who is not able to go. I'm not sure if she wants to fight or just to help in help the fallen soldiers. It's kind of hard. She seems to have this real uh, uh, almost like glamorization of some of the things that the men are doing over there. Um, so you could talk about that. You could discuss that. But we're getting a lot about her personality, right? And part of how she does that is really well in this poem that I love is with these dashes, right? She's going on these beautiful lines, and all of a sudden, but I must sit and sew, and this repeated refrain as well. There's these beautiful lines, right? The grim-faced, stern-eyed, gazing beyond the ken of lesser souls whose eyes have not seen death. I mean, that's a powerful idea, right? These soldiers, these battle-hardened soldiers, have this knowledge about life that is only possible for people involved in this. And then to sum up the the stanza with this return to this, what she sees as this wasteful domesticity or this restrictive domesticity, is a really neat structure and insight into the speaker's mind, the speaker of this poem's mind. And then I love the ending too, because you get this these great lines. You need me, Christ. It is no roseate dream that beckons me. This pretty futile seam, it stifles me. God, must I sit and sew? So you can read this in multiple ways. She could be addressing Christ and God. Is this some kind of like almost supplication to the heavens? Or are Christ and God just expletives? Are they just like, you need me, like she's angry, right? Christ. You can read it either way, and it's really, it adds a nice interpretive task for the poem, which is nice. And here too, it is no roseate, and that just means like rose-colored, optimistic, that kind of thing. It is no roseate dream that beckons me. So is she not into this domestic life that she feels she's forced into as a woman, or is it that she's not able to go out and take part in this martial life that she wants to, right? This pretty fetal seam, it stifles me. God, must I sit and sew, right? So, anyways, this is just an example of a dramatic monologue. You can see it's unlike a ballad. Nothing's set up for us. We have to deduce everything about this woman based on what she tells us about herself. And so you could ask yourself, what does she want to achieve in this poem? Does she achieve it? Or is it just her cursing the heavens? Is there more revealed about her than she intends? These are all great questions you could ask based on, if you were to read this through and go through it, because we're getting this person's this character being developed through their meditation on this situation.